the Chirik. The Chirik is called a melech. It's called one of the kings of the Nikudis. And the sound of the Chirik is E. So for example, if you put a Chirik under the Aleph, you would have Chirik Aleph E. Or Chirik Beis B, etc., etc. So that is the sound of the Chirik. What is the graphic design of the Chirik? That is a dot. What does a dot mean? So we find that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the famous sage and the author of the Zohar, says, Ana Simona Ba'alma. I am a Simon in this world. What does that mean? It has two interpretations. One is, I am merely a speck, a dot in the entire universe. That's all I am. I'm nothing. Another interpretation is, if you want to see God in the world, I am a representative, I am a siman, I am a sign that represents God. How do these two concepts come together? So the answer is that Rashbi was the ultimate level of bittul. Bittul means self-nullification. And because he was so nullified, he was transparent. And that is, he had no ego, he had no yesh, he didn't consider himself to be important, and he was simply a funnel and a channel to bring God's light and energy into the universe. And that is the meaning of the Chirik. The Chirik is a little dot that a person realizes that he's really nothing. Without God's strength, without God's energy, without God bringing him into creation every moment anew, the person would totally be non-existent. And in truth, the Chirik, we said a moment ago, is a melech. It's called one of the kings of the Nikudis. But also the Chirik is an eved, is also a servant. And our rabbis tell us that when there's the letter Yud after the Chirik, then it is a king. If there's no Yud in the letter after the Chirik, then the Chirik is an eved, a servant. And practically, when there's a Yud after the Chirik, we elongate the Chirik. We make it E. If there's no Yud after the letter with the Chirik, it's a shorter E. So the king, you elongate the letters, and when you have one of the servants under the letters, you shorten the sound. But here we say that the Chirik could be a king, and the Chirik could be an eved. And in truth, in Chassidus, we talk about it, there are two levels of servants, there are two levels of bittul. There's a level of bittul hayesh and a level of bittul b'mitzias. And that is, one is, I am a yesh, I exist. However, the I will become nullified. I'm willing to give myself over to God. It's interesting, and I've said this many times, that the English language is one of the only languages that the I is capitalized. It's all about ego. It's the I, the big I. The uppercase I exist. But however, I will pray to God. I will give charity. I'll do God a favor. That's bittul hayesh. That is the smaller Chirik. That is the servant Chirik. But then the melech Chirik, which is the larger Chirik, or the elongated Chirik, this represents bittul b'mitzias. I don't exist at all. My entire existence is only God, and therefore I am simply transparent, and God's will is my will. This is the Chirik that is called Melech. Why is it called Melech, the king? Because we are told, Eved Melech Melech. The servant of a king is the king himself. If you're totally nullified to the king and you become one with the king, you too are the king. So that is the design of the Chirik. It's the smallest of the Nikudis. It's under the letters. However, this Chirik has the ability to rise to become a malupim, to be in the side of the letters, and even to go to the top of the letters and to become the cholam. And this, as the Alter Rebbe says, is through netzach, the attribute of strength, that a person strengthens himself to accomplish more and to rise even higher. That is the design of the Nikuda of the Chirik, which is the soul of all the letters. And so therefore the Chirik gives us that ability to nullify our will for God's will, which connects us with the meaning of Chirik. What is the meaning of Chirik? So we find in the story of Yecheskel or Ezekiel in chapter 1, Ezekiel begins to describe the famous Markava, the famous chariot that finds itself in the higher worlds, in the world of Bria. And over there we are told that he saw a vision, and the vision was 4 different chayos, 4 different angels were in this chariot. And they had a face of a man, on the other side they had a face of an ox, a face of a lion, and a face of a nesher, the face of an eagle. And it says that these chayos, these angels, were ratzoi v'shuv. They were going backwards and forwards. They were shuckling when they were davening. They were very, very impassioned with God, and therefore they were running to connect, to go higher and higher. And then it goes on to say, on top of the chariot, there was ke'ein hakerach hanoira. There was the color of awesome ice. Where does the ice come to play in the entire scenario of the Markava? So Chassidus says the idea of ice represents bittul, represents total nullification. That after a person prays, and after a person studies Torah, and after a person gives charity, and after a person teaches others, the higher he goes, the lower and smaller he considers himself, till he finally becomes ke'ein hakerach, he becomes like this ice, that he's totally stymied, he can no longer move. He's frozen in his path, because he no longer exists, he has no energy on his own. He sees the greatness of God, the awesomeness of God, he realizes that he's totally nothing. So this is the word kerach, which means ice, are the same letters as chirik, which are made up of the kuf and the reish and the ches. What is ice? Ice is the opposite of water. Water is something which flows from above to below, implying a giver, a teacher. Ice is, however, when the water becomes frozen, you can no longer give, because you totally become nullified, you realize you have nothing to give. In essence, you become transparent, and now you begin to give, not that I am the giver, but rather I am fulfilling God's will because I am simply an extension of God. And this is also connected with the sephira, the attribute of the Chirik, which is Malchus, Kingship, which is the 10th of all the Sfirot, the final Sfira, because Malchus, Kingship, means fulfilling the will of the king, doing what the king asks and doing what the king wants, and removing your will from the entire equation. So Malchus represents bittul, represents being nullified to the king. And finally we have the gematria of the Chirik, which is 10. As we said earlier, that the dot is like the letter Yud, and the line is like the letter Vav. The letter Yud equals 10. And this implies that a person's bittul, a person's self-nullification to God, should not only be on 1 or 2 or 3 levels of his attributes, maybe when it comes to intellect, but when it comes to emotion, I have my own feelings. On the contrary, all 10 of the person's attributes, the 3 intellectual faculties and the 7 emotional faculties, are totally a chariot of God, and therefore all of them are within this level of bittul. And that is the meaning of the Nikud of the Chiruk, to be totally nullified to God's will and to become one with God. Okay, any questions? You don't have to ask a question. Okay, it's a first. Any other comments or statements?
Seems like the implication is that to fully become a tool of God, you end up almost frozen, like as though you're. I don't know. There's something strange about the idea that when you become so totally pure that you're a tool of God, that you no longer have your own thing to give, and that's the highest value. The implication of being frozen, an extension.
It doesn't mean a person is naive. It doesn't mean a person is shallow. On the contrary, that a person went through all the knowledge that exists in the world, and he realizes the more he learns, that everything becomes smaller and smaller, and that all of this is finite compared to God's infinity. So he comes to the realization, a conclusion, intellectually, that there's something beyond my intellect, there's something beyond my understanding, and there's something which is truly eternal. And therefore he voluntarily surrenders his entire being to God, to this higher reality. But it's not that we're talking about a fool or a person who's dumb and he simply is a robot. That's an angel. An angel's a robot. We're not angels. The difference between man and angel is the angel are spiritual robots. They have no free choice. Man has free choice. That's why God is not excited with the angels, excited with man. I gave this example once before, that an artist once came to the Rebbe and he asked the Rebbe, why is God so excited about man's avodah, man's service? Simply, we're finite, we make so many mistakes, and we have so many other thoughts that go into our minds during our prayers, and yet supposedly we bring God nachas, we bring God pleasure, and the angels don't bring God any pleasure. So God said, so the Rebbe said to him, you're an artist, yeah? So tell me, what's the difference between a picture that you take with a camera or a picture that you draw? If you take a picture of a human being with a camera, it's an exact replica of the person. And yet that picture costs you $1, $10, $20. Yet if you paint a picture of that person, and the replica is not exactly detailed in every reality, yet if it's a big artist, he'll charge $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 for the painting. Why? The picture from the camera is so much more perfect than the picture from the painting. It's a good question, no? So the man said, Rebbe, you don't understand. When you look at an artistic design, you see the emotions and the struggle of the artist in the picture. So the Rebbe said, exactly, that's the point. An angel is like a picture from a camera. It's perfect. It's a Kodak moment. It's perfect. But yet, there's no struggle. There's no emotion. A human being that has this constant struggle. It's not a perfect design. It's not a perfect replica. But the excitement, the emotion, the strain, the stress, the pressure, the yin and the yang that goes into the picture, that is what the buyer sees, and that's what he wants. And the same is true with God. When God sees that, yes, it's not so easy to daven, it's not so easy to do a mitzvah. And we have this constant struggle every day. Every day we paint new pictures before God. God says, this is precious, this is beautiful, I want this on my wall. That's the idea of bittul. That we come to the realization that we have to be bittul. I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm going to fight my eye. I'm going to make my eye a little smaller. I'm going to do what God wants. Make myself into a little dot. When God sees how man is willing to sacrifice himself for God, that brings God ultimate pleasure.